All right, so your home appraised. So now what should we expect? And this is great. I mean, we've gotten through so many different things that cause issues to get to closing, and an appraisal is one of the last major ones. Okay, and so the anticipation of getting to close on your house, it's just right around the corner. And really the question for people at this point is, well, we appraised, so now what happens? Or maybe it didn't appraise, but we came to terms with the seller based on the appraisal, and we're still good, we're moving forward. So now what? So depending on how far out closing is, a lot of what can happen is lenders will ask, well, do you want to close sooner? Because now they've got the appraisal back, maybe they've got enough time to get the paperwork done and really finalize everything, and maybe they're able to shave off a few days or even a week or so to move up the closing. And so they'll put it on the buyer to say, would you like to close sooner? That may or may not be a good idea for you depending on your situation. So it really is a personal choice, and it really also depends on whether the lender can even make that happen. But it's certainly something that often becomes the question if we have plenty of time between getting the appraisal and closing date. It also depends on the seller's needs too. I mean, we did come up with a number that normally the number that we use for closing date is to give the lender enough time to make everything happen. But we can do things preemptively to make sure we shave off time before we ever make it in to an offer. So there's things like that can really tighten up the timeline at the end just by being proactive at the beginning. The question I'll get is, this means we're going to close, right? Like we're closing. We made it through appraisal. We got the option. We've done everything. We're going to close. The answer is most likely we're going to close. And I will never give 100%, yeah, we're going to close, simply because I can't account for outliers and anomaly situations that just happen, okay? So I'm going to give you a list of things that you need to understand could absolutely happen between appraisal, getting the appraisal back and negotiating that, and closing day that could certainly keep a home from closing. So here they are. Death of any person in the contract. Okay? If you've got somebody in the contract on the buyer or the seller side, or even the agents themselves, that can, or if the agent's broker, depending on the size of the brokerage, that can absolutely affect whether or not we close or close on time. Okay? Someone not being able to perform or show up for signatures when they started out being able to in the beginning, that can absolutely affect whether or not that home closes on time or at all. A little personal story, our home that we bought, we bought from sellers. They built this home in 1977, and they did an amazing job. We love this home, but they were also elder, and they were in poor health at the time, and there was a power of attorney involved, but the power of attorney was only effective as long as they were both alive. Well, it turns out by the time we made our offer, one of them had fallen gravely ill, and we end up having to rush closing simply because we had to do it before they passed. Otherwise, we would have been in probate. And so we were very fortunate that we had a lender who could hustle with the circumstances and push this thing forward so that we could actually do that without having to wait to close, be in probate, because we might have lost one of our sellers in the process. But in the end, we got it done, and unfortunately we did lose both our sellers very quickly after that, but we love the home that they built, and it's our family's home now, and we cherish it. So and that's the beautiful thing about homes is, like, I mean, you get to have this experience living in a home, especially one that's been around, and you get to see what they did, the original owners, and then now you get your own history in it, and it's just, I mean, I don't know, I love it, and just being able to share that now with my family and knowing that they love this home so much, it's really cool, and that's just one of the neat things about home ownership. So Other things that can happen is catastrophic financial events. For instance, a job loss of a buyer. Absolutely. The lender has to confirm that the buyer or buyers, whatever their income situation was at the beginning of the process, is still the same or better, and so they're going to verify that right before closing. Something can absolutely happen. Let's be honest, times are crazy, and some people aren't sure from one day to the next or week or month to the next whether or not they'll have their job, and that can absolutely affect whether or not you close. And so that can happen. Absolutely happen between appraisal or at any point in the process. And so as soon as something like that might happen, we'd want to make adjustments quickly. Another one would be the home suffers a major issue, okay? Flooding, catches fire, tornadoes, earthquakes, anything that could make the home unlivable could happen at any point in the process before closing. And you made an offer on a home in a certain condition, and we expect that that home's going to be in that condition at closing date. So if for some reason the home is not, well, then we need to account for that and either push back or pull out of the contract altogether if the home is not in the condition it originally was when we started out, which is why we want to go back and do a walkthrough before closing. Normally about 2 to 3 days before closing, we'll get in that house, we'll take a look at it, make sure that the house is standing and not burnt down or whatever craziness might be going on, or maybe that the sellers didn't take something that's supposed to be there as agreed in the original contract. So that's certainly something that can affect closing date. So an example of an outlier event is in March of 2020, when the market tanked and we had, the COVID situation, we had some other stuff going on. A lot of lending institutions lost their access to money. It was gone. And depending on those institutions and where they got their money, they just flat out didn't have it. And so the buyers and sellers, everything was worked out, everything was agreed on. As far as the buyers knew, they had the money, and then they made it all the way to closing day, in some cases right before closing, and they got word from the lending company that we're sorry, you can't close because there is no money, right? That's a wild situation, and there was hundreds of people probably more than that this happened to across the country. And a lot of lending institutions just lost their lending ability, for a good period of time or indefinitely. And some of the companies could follow through on their lending just because of how they got their money. So that's a whole different topic of make sure that you've got a company backing you financially that has the stability. Basically, did they make it through the COVID situation of 2020 and still fund all their deals? If that was them, then you're probably going to be okay. But that's just an example of the crazy things that can come up. So to sit here and tell someone, yes, you're going to close because everything that you've done has worked out, I can't say that, because we just can't predict what's going to happen, but we can just position everything so that it's in the best place it can be to move forward. It's one of the reasons why when we make it through the appraisal process, if we have a little bit of time left to get to closing, if everybody agrees to close earlier, it just allows the deal to get done, executed, we can move forward, and you have possession of your home, and we can avoid any random unpredictable moments that could come up. Thanks so much for sticking around to the end of the video. And remember, if there's anything in the world I can do for you, just be sure to reach me. You can always leave a comment below or hit me up with the email or phone number listed in the description below. And be sure to like and subscribe, and that way you'll be notified when other videos come out in the future.